My brother, how you doing?
Hello, is this Dave?
Aloha, Edgar. It certainly is. Good to hear your voice.
Same here. Excellent, excellent. Hold
Yes,
on a second. I'm going to open a Diet Coke here.
sure. Take your time and huge aloha, mahalo. Welcome back, my brother. Grateful that you're doing this.
Ah, I'm happy to be here and ready to rock and roll.
And explain, I guess, for folks first how, and we were thrilled to have your brother Johnny as a guest before too. Not only have you been on the show, but we had Johnny on a couple different times on the phone, in person, the whole deal. So explain how this idea of the Brother Johnny album first came about, and then how the particular individuals, because you have a lot of different folks who are part of it, how they came to be, whether it was stories of people's connections to Johnny, to you, or the songs.
Absolutely. Well, I could talk about this for hours, but I should start out by saying that I initially was dead set against doing a tribute album, and I'll explain why. But Johnny passed away in 2014, and I immediately started getting requests and offers from record companies regarding a tribute album. And they would ask questions like, how long will it take? We want to strike while the iron is hot. And what guest artists can you guarantee? And I said, I don't know until we get into the project. And if it's contingent on those kinds of issues,
Right.
I don't know that I'm interested. It just felt like to me, business people
Yep.
sensing an opportunity to exploit Johnny's name just to sell a few records. And
Hmm.
that was not something that I wanted to be a part of. And in all honesty, I was emotionally devastated. I just was not ready to make the album. So, as I said, I didn't see myself ever doing this. And it's odd that in life, I sort of had always gone out of my way not to encroach on Johnny's territory. He
Mm.
was like the blues guy, and we had very different musical tastes. And I just never would have imagined playing Johnny's music. But then something occurred. There had been a tour that had been booked before Johnny's passing called the Rock and Blues Fest. It was a multi act show, but it included Johnny and his band, me and my band, both of us with our respective bands. And then there was going to be jamming at the end of the show. And I just assumed that certainly this would be canceled. But much to my surprise, they wanted it to go on as planned with me and my band as the headliners of the show. And I thought, this is going to be emotionally difficult. But after thinking about it, I thought, well, in Johnny's memory, it's really the right thing to do.
Mm.
So at the end of the first show, I remember I played Frankenstein, usually our closer, and I did like Johnny Be Good and Rock and Roll Hoochie Coo, a few of those songs that Johnny and I had played together. And it was actually far from being what I thought of as emotionally difficult. It turned out to be a great source of strength and comfort to
Mm.
me, playing those songs and just seeing how much love and respect for Johnny there was, not only from the audience, but all of the people that were on the show came up to jam, and it became a sort of a tradition. And that helped me realize that it was not just business people that wanted this, it was Johnny's loyal, devoted fans who really wanted to see this happen. So that's when I first started to entertain the idea seriously. Then, just to explain how it all came about, there are three people that I always, when I'm talking about this album, that I want to start out thanking. The first being my wife, Monique, to whom I've been happily and blissfully married for now 43 years.
Wow.
Not bad for rock and rollers, and in California, no less.
Right.
But she and I always make these kinds of decisions together. And a lot of times she's very intuitive, and I trust her judgment sometimes more so than my analytical thinking about what I should do and, the reasons behind it. And she was very definite and immediately said, well, of course you should. I always hear you talk about how Johnny is your all-time musical hero, and without him, you would not be where you are today. Well, here's your opportunity to acknowledge that. And
Mm.
I think you owe that to yourself, to Johnny, and to the world. And she couldn't have been more right about that, because it turned out like I thought the making of the album was going to be possibly difficult. And I knew it would be emotional and stir up a lot of the old childhood memories. But it really turned out to be just the most uplifting spiritual experience. It's really a life altering thing for me, and something that I never would have expected. But after having made the album, I actually feel closer to Johnny as never before. And it did bring back lots of memories, but it was very cleansing, healing in a sense.
What's one of those memories that it brought back that you had not thought of in all that time?
Well, the most emotional song for me on the record was Drown in My Own Tears. That was a song, Johnny recorded it on the first Columbia album, and I had always felt like he did that song especially for me, because it's a Ray Charles song. And if I had to name one artist that I think is a major influence, it would be Ray. And Johnny, during the making of that album, I remember in the hotel room, he said, "Hey, Edgar, I want to do Drown in My Own Tears. Can you do the horn arrangement just like Ray and just play the piano?" And I always felt like he wanted to give me the opportunity to do something in the style that he knew I loved.
Yeah.
He didn't even put guitar on that song. It was very much like Ray had done it.
Yeah.
But when it came time for me to sing that song, I was doing it at home. I did all the vocals in my home studio. I started the whole album out at home with my piano set up. But when I sang that song, it felt like I was singing it back to him just the same way he had sung it to me so many years ago, when he was so young and so vital and so alive. And I felt like I was singing it not only to him, but to my mother and father who have passed away, all the bandmates that I had the joy of working with that are no longer with us, like Jerry LaCroix, the lead singer in White Trash. I'm the last surviving member of the Edgar Winter group. Dan Hartman, Ronnie Montrose, and Chuck Ruff have all passed. So I just choked up and broke down singing that song a number of times, but got through it. And at the end of that, I experienced this tremendous sense of serenity and peace and healing. It was just really a very uplifting experience, and one that I'll carry with me for the rest of my life. That may be my favorite song, but it was sad in a way. The general making of the album was just a joyous, uplifting experience. A lot of the people were longtime friends and people I had worked with before, but many more of them were people that I might have worked with and talked to in passing, and we'd played shows together, but I never really got a chance to sit down and talk to and get to know. And just seeing that tremendous outpouring of love and respect for Johnny, and how much of themselves these artists all put into the album. It's just an experience that it's really impossible to put into words. But if you know my music at all and know Johnny's music, it's going to be an experience you won't want to miss. And aside from that, I tried to make it not only a tribute to Johnny, but to the blues and to guitar. And I hope I've succeeded to some degree in that.
You totally have, my brother. I mean, and the thing about some of those things you were mentioning, when you think of the folks, so, and I can't, we're not going to go through the whole list because Edgar doesn't have time for that, but Joe Walsh and Michael McDonald, Billy Gibbons, Ringo Starr, just some of the major names that populate this record. And dialing in on what you were saying, I liked some of that. Those cats are probably the cats that more were populating your life. Some of the other ones you said were obviously fans of Johnny's music. But then a third category I'm just curious about, and that could be any of them, of anybody that worked on the record, who was it who was actually had any stories of working with Johnny or was closest with Johnny or told you anything cool about knowing him, being with him, some cool Johnny story?
Well, I think probably Billy Gibbons, being from Texas, there was the real emotional connection there. Johnny always loved ZZ Top. And Billy had all kinds of stories from shows that he had played with Johnny, various clubs, all coming from Texas, places that we had all played without realizing that we had played both in Texas and Louisiana. And Billy, he really took it to heart. And he would tell stories about how he and his band would sit down and listen to Johnny's records and how much it had meant to him. That meant so much to me. And when he came in, I thought, well, he'll just come in, he'll put the guitar part on. He came in for about 5 days, and kind of deconstructed the song. First of all, I should talk a little bit about the song selection and just the fact that I never associated any particular song with a specific artist.
Mm,
What I tried to do is, first of all, I didn't want it to just be like a nostalgia album. I've never really been a fan of tribute albums because a lot of times you might as well substitute a copy album or a sound alike album. And I didn't want to just round up the usual suspects. I wanted it to be a more varied cast of characters. So there are a lot of people that you would expect to be there, people like Billy Gibbons, but then there are other people like Ringo Starr, Michael McDonald,
right.
Robin Ford that you might not expect. But what I did, I never suggested that anybody try to emulate Johnny's style or play like Johnny. And I would always start by giving everybody a song list because I didn't want anybody to do a song that they didn't feel passionately about doing. And Billy picked I'm Yours and I'm Hers. And I, I was so thankful for that because being married to my wife Monique for 43 years, I'm yours and I'm hers and I'm somebody else's too. I wasn't gonna be singing that song. But when I thought of who's the perfect person to sing this song, and I thought of Billy, 26 girls all in a knot, it ain't all good, but it's what we got. I thought he's the perfect person to sing this song. And also I had originally thought I would just sing all the songs because I thought, well, nobody's voice is going to sound more like Johnny's. I'm yours and I'm hers. Somebody else's too. And when I thought about Billy, I said, if he's going to play, I don't want to just hear him play. I want to hear him sing because he has such a unique voice and it has so much character. It just turned out perfect. And then after he sort of deconstructed and rearranged the song, everything changed with the onset of COVID. And
Right.
in the beginning of the album, I thought it would take about a year to make. I knew it wasn't going to be short. I mean, we used to make albums in 2 or 3 weeks. 6 weeks would be long. But with the onset of COVID, I wasn't able to be there some of the times, and I had a hard and fast rule. I said, I'm going to be at every session, every step of this, because it meant so much to me. And toward the end, we had to get performances from people where that was impossible. And there were certain guys that Johnny loved, Warren Haynes and Derek Trucks, both having played with the Allman Brothers. He used to talk about them all the time.
Wow.
And Billy played regular guitar. And that song, I'm Yours and I'm Hers, I always thought of as a slide guitar song. So I thought, well, what we should do is I thought about all the slide players out there, and I knew the one that Johnny loved the most, Derek Chucks, as a slide player. So after Billy had put on all of his stuff, then Derek put just this incredible over the top slide guitar solo that I've talked to a lot of people, and they think that that interplay between Billy and Derek was so cool. And not only that, but there's a third guitarist, David Grissom.
Oh,
And
yeah.
this brings me back to the people that I wanted to thank. So sorry for going off in all of these directions, but I have to thank Ross Hogarth. Ross was originally just going to be the engineer and the mixer. And I'd worked with Ross on Rebel Road, the last album that I did. And he just did such an incredible job on that. He really saved that album. And I thought, I don't ever want to work with any other engineer and mixer. He just understands exactly the feel and the music. He was a musician himself, but Ross made so many profound suggestions on a lot of people that I was not that familiar with. For example, he suggested John McPhee from the Doobie Brothers to play slide on Highway 61. And I had forgotten about a lot of those early Doobie songs and how great the slide playing was. And he suggested Doyle Bramhall Jr., who I knew of as playing with Eric Clapton, but I didn't know how much of a traditional blues slide guitarist that that's a dying art. And I think one of the things that separated Johnny, there are lots of great electric blues guitarists, but Johnny's slide playing, and particularly the old authentic Delta blues style with the alternate tunings, there are not that many people that know how to do that. Ross also suggested David Grissom. And Dave, he played with John Mellencamp. He's from Texas. And when we started talking about guitar players, Ross said, you can take any song, any of these songs that you're suggesting for the album, David can play these with the right feel and with the authenticity that you're going to love. He's listened to all of that, and he was dead on. So David played all the rhythm throughout I'm Yours and I'm Hers, and he also played on Johnny Be Good. And that brings us to Joe Walsh, talking about Joe. Joe and I go back years and years. I mean, I met Joe when we used to play shows together as the James Gang. And then I remember when Rick was doing his album at the Caribou Ranch, which was a studio up in Colorado. And Joe happened to be doing his album at the same time. And Gerthio had created that studio. It was a beautiful place. And Joe and I would be hanging out after the sessions, and shooting pool, just having a good time. And when I asked Joe, for some reason, I just had this idea. I had said that I didn't associate many of these songs with a specific artist, but Joe, I thought Johnny Be Good. So when I asked Joe about it, he said, I don't know. He said, it's classic Chuck Berry. I don't know what I can bring to that. And then when we discussed the song list, he picked the song Stranger, which is just, I think, a beautiful ballad and very uncharacteristic of what Johnny would usually write. It has really beautiful melody and more advanced chords. And Joe just did a really emotional solo, very sensitive solo. But that song, I think, reveals a sensitivity and a vulnerability that Johnny doesn't usually display. And it's not in that particular blues idiom that he usually does. But I did talk Joe. I just said that song, Johnny Be Good, you'd think, well, it's obvious, Brother Johnny, Johnny Winter tribute, Johnny Be Good. But there's a backstory behind that song, which that's the song that we started out playing back as far as I can remember when we were just kids in our first band, Johnny and the Jammers. And there was this local talent contest that was associated with a movie called Go Johnny Go, that Chuck was in that movie, Chuck Berry was in it, Jimmy Clanton, I forget who all, but anyway, this thing was called the Johnny Melody Contest. And so the hottest song we knew was Johnny Be Good. So we entered this contest. We played the song. We won. And first prize was you get to make your very own record.
Wow.
So, so there was a local studio there in Beaumont called Gulf Coast Recording. And this guy, Jack Clement, who was really a well-known country guy who worked with Johnny Cash, and they did a lot of country sessions. And we would come in and play on some of these things. I played on a lot of them. I was only like 11 or 12 years old,
Wow.
and they could get me to play on these. I never charged anything. I just loved getting to play on a record and
Sure.
getting to hear yourself back. So we did this song called School Day Blues, Johnny, one of the first songs that he wrote. And as they say, the rest is history. So if it hadn't been for Johnny Be Good, that was really the song that launched our professional careers. It allowed us to record that first album. So Johnny recorded it, of course, on his first album, and I had to put it on the record because of that.
Yep.
But when I thought about, we used to sing a lot of these songs together, and I thought, man, getting Joe, just doing this with Joe would be perfect. And I always thought that Joe is a real rocker. So I expected him to pick a song like that or Jumpin' Jack Flash. Then when he picked Stranger, I was really surprised. But I said, well, why don't we just sing it? And he said, oh, yeah, sure. So went over to his place. He's got a beautiful studio, and we had our arms around each other. Go, go, Johnny, go. Johnny Be Good. And it was just like, it was just such a warm feeling. Like it reminded me of all the times we had done that song together. But since he played guitar on the other song, we decided to get David Grissom to do the guitar, and he just nailed it. He had listened to both versions, so it was sort of a composite of the traditional Chuck Berry riffs and a lot of the stuff that Johnny did.
Right.
He kind of put it down the middle and just made it really cool. And I played all of that. The Chuck Berry piano, Johnny Johnson, great piano player that played with Chuck. And I put all that boogie New Orleans style piano and did a little sax solo in there. And it turned out to just be really fun, cool song. And I'm playing it right now live. As you know, I'm speaking to you from a hotel room in Toronto, and I'm out here on tour with Ringo Starr and his all-star band, which includes, of course, myself, Steve Lukather from Toto. So we're doing songs like, Hold the Line, Africa. Then the bassist is Hamish Stewart from the Average White Band. So we're doing Cut the Cake and Pick Up the Pieces and Work to Do. The other guitarist is Colin Hay from the Australian band Men at Work.
Right.
So, yeah. So, we're doing Down Under and Who Can It Be Now? And the second drummer in the band is Greg Bissonette, who plays on the entire Brother Johnny album. Every song except Stranger, which we were talking about a little before.
Right.
And that's the song that Ringo Starr plays drums on. And how that came about is when Joe picked Stranger to do, I don't know if you're aware of this, but Ringo is married to the lovely Barbara Bach, and her sister, Marjorie, is married to Joe Walsh.
Oh, I did not know that.
So Ringo and Joe are brothers-in-law.
Wow.
So since Joe was on Stranger, I didn't know if Ringo would agree. It was like just a dream to me. I mean, Ringo doesn't play on that many people's records that I'm aware of,
Right.
but I had done the All Star Band with him back as early as 2006. I did it 2006, 2008, 2010, and 2011. And finally, I got up the nerve, to call him. Uh, uh, and he said, Edgar, I'll do it for you. And that just touched my heart because I really wasn't expecting it. But I had thought, because Joe was there and they're very close and they play on a lot of one another's records, I thought, well, to me, that might just be the thing that will make it have that connection and would make sense. Also, I thought Ringo, he does these great fills, like in all the ballads that have a lot of bass. Boom, 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 and I thought, well, Stranger would be perfect for him to do all of that stuff. So then we had Joe on guitar and Ringo on drums. And then my wife Monique and I were listening to some roughs of it. And I had just put a scratch vocal on there. And just out of the blue, she said, you know, Michael McDonald would sound great singing this song. And as soon as she said it, like in my mind, I could be, hello, pretty stranger. And, he just got that haunting voice. And it was just perfect. I had worked with Michael back in the mid 80s, and I just got this call out of the blue. I didn't know that Michael was familiar with me or my music or even knew who I was. And he invited me to play in his first solo band after the Doobies, which
Wow.
was such an honor and
Yeah.
just an incredible thing. And Robin Ford was the guitarist in that band, Willie Weeks, great bass player. And then Michael moved to Hawaii and we sort of lost touch and hadn't talked to each other for years. And Ross Hogarth, the engineer who I've spoken about,
Yep.
he knew exactly how to get in touch with him. And Michael ended up putting on that vocal at John McPhee's studio near Santa Barbara. And this was more toward the end of the project. But that vocal to me is just magical. When I look at that song, and it's an unusual track, sort of a deep track that you'd think, because it's so uncharacteristic of what Johnny would do. But when you think of Joe Walsh, Ringo Starr, and Michael McDonald, even on the same record, much less the same song, what an interesting array of musicians to end up. And you can see, like, from these stories, just how I had no idea what the album was going to be when I started making it or who was going to be on it. And, the people that ended up on this record are the people who really wanted to be there, the people who it really meant something. They just all offered such incredible heartfelt performances. And I can't thank everybody enough for everything that they've brought to the album.
Appreciate it, brother Edgar. We love hearing about it, and we'll play that tune actually to go out with coming up right here, and just thinking about the two of you and sending. I mean, so grateful over the years to have had Johnny come through town and be on the air with us, and even let us into his dressing room to do a bit, and then of course you yourself, and then talking about this new brother Johnny. And it's Edgar Winter. The record is out and has all these great stories attached to it with so many different folks, and super grateful for your time. Hopefully you've enjoyed being on the show and back with us today, my brother. I hopefully
Absolutely. I just want to thank all of the fans who have followed my career throughout all these years, as well as Johnny's. And we love you all. We couldn't have done it without you. And keep on rocking.
thanks, Edgar. Aloha, brother.
All right. Bye bye.